Okay, maybe we can start. Please find a seat if you haven't. You can sit anywhere you want. Thank you so much for coming. Good afternoon. My name is Xiaoyu Weng. I'm the artistic director of the Tanoto Art Foundation, which you have come to this special exhibition the foundation has set up called the Rituals of Perception. And we're using the venue as a pop-up. And this is the last day, actually last afternoon of the show. If you haven't had an opportunity, oh, what happened? I think so. Okay, oh, now it's on. If you haven't had the opportunity to see the exhibition, we will turn everything back on after the talk, so you will have the chance to maybe do a last sort of round of the show. And today, as the closing event, we have a special performance. And following the performance, there will be a conversation with two artists that are featured in the exhibition. And just a little bit about the Tanoto Art Foundation before we start. Tanoto Art Foundation, TAF, T-A-F, endeavor to connect and engage people to the art of our time. We have established the foundation with a mission to nurture dialogues around the experience of contemporary art in Southeast Asia. TAF is one of the first private art foundations in Singapore dedicated to bring cultures and communities across the Asia-Pacific, South America, and beyond, while building new, unexplored connections. Our goal is to deepen the appreciation and engagement with contemporary art, creating a space where artists, audience, and diverse voices can come together. And today, we have a special performance by Oaxaca-based artist Carolina Fusilier. A little bit of Carolina. She is a multidisciplinary artist whose practice explores the materiality of technology, nonlinear temporalities, and post-human imaginaries, and the intersection of organic and mechanical bodies, as well as industry and domestic environments. Her work unfolds across moving image, film, painting, sound, performance, and site-specific installations. You will find her work downstairs over there. Later you can go take a look. Maybe it'll give you new experience after seeing the performance. And this performance is called Attuning to Sonic Residue. It centers on a handcrafted device designed to capture radio waves and electromagnetic frequencies integrated into a wearable suit. Emitted in real time through a speaker embedded in the costume that the artist will be wearing, the sound transforms the performer's body and the surrounding artworks into living antenna capable of receiving and amplifying invisible signals. The work frames the body as a technological interface, rendering perceptible the constant exchanges between bodies, architecture, and technological systems, and positioning active listening as a ritual practice. We will hear more about the work itself during our conversation later. Also, I wanted to point out that this performance is a collaboration with Tokyo-based producer and musician Fumitake Tamura, who is actually stationed downstairs. And the performance will be around 20 to 25 minutes. After that, we will have a short break to set up a station where the conversation will be taking place between Carolina and also the other artist, Stephanie Comilang, whose work is also featured in the show. I will introduce her later when we are all on stage. So Carolina, all yours. Thank you. Again, for some of you might have arrived a little late, my name is Xiaoyu Weng. I'm the artistic director of the Tanoto Art Foundation. Today we're here as the closing event for this exhibition, Rituals of Perception. We're very happy to be able to have two artists whose work are featured in this exhibition here with us. Both came from very far away, so we're very happy they're here. I first would like to introduce Stephanie Comilang. Stephanie is an artist living and working between Toronto and Berlin. Her documentary-based works create narratives that look at how our understandings of mobility, capital, and labor on a global scale are shaped through various cultural and social factors. Her work has been exhibited internationally. I'm not going to read the long list of your resume, but Stephanie's beautiful video artwork is shown behind the scaffolding over there on the large stage. We also have two print-based installation work also in the front of the exhibition that you will be able to see when you first enter the show. And also here we have Carolina Fusilier. You just saw the beautiful performance, and I have gave a brief intro of Carolina's work, but you can also see her sculptural and installation piece down here in the exhibition as well. And I personally find your practice very different, but at the same time share a lot of interests. That's where the idea came along to put you both in a conversation. And then I realized you actually know each other already, so that's even better. Maybe I will start by letting Carolina say a few words about the performance, what we just experienced. It's on.
Hello, hello. Okay. Thank you so much for this amazing opportunity to be here from such a faraway land. This is for me a very experimental work because I'm not a performer, and I usually don't work that often with performance. But I found a great opportunity to explore this in this space, thinking a little bit of the connection with the work downstairs that is called Las Inmortalistas. And this work is about a little bit of, I love working with found material, especially like dischargeable and garbage material. And with these pieces, I was working with packaging from electronics, like styrofoam mostly. And I convert this packaging into this, I call them like fossil, like technological fossils or painting machineries that are in a poetic way transforming dead matter into living matter. This was a work made specifically for a museum in Mexico City, a very historical place with a lot of history. It's the storage of a very important pre-Hispanic collection. So these works were bringing alive, it was like playing with this kind of the spiritual sense of the rooms through sound also. And talking about sound, I feel this could be a way of introducing this performance. I am also a filmmaker. I work with a lot of field recording. One of my main practices is going around with a recorder, using it for every single thing. And what I wanted to bring here is a little bit of like tracing radio frequencies in the air that are usually invisible and like kind of materializing and into a physicality space. So I did this suit in a very playful and experimental way, but the idea was moving around and creating this living antenna by kind of tracing all the signals that are circulating in the space and kind of geometrically like finding them through the suit. So I don't know if
Yeah, that's great. I think it's very interesting to think about radio and radio frequencies and waves when we think about technology, because it is like an old form of technology, but at the same time, it's a very radical kind of apparatus we still have today. And I want to come back to Stephanie's work because there is a component in this film also mentioned about radio. There's this Amazonia Women's Radio Collective. I don't know if I catch the name correctly, but you can certainly talk a little bit more. I want you to maybe also tell the audience a bit more about the idea behind this film and how these layers of different kind of storylines come together, because there is certainly this interplay also with technology, but also ancient wisdoms and traditional cosmology. So maybe give us an overview of how you arrived here, and for people who might have not watched your film yet.
Sure.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and it's my first time in Singapore, so I'm really happy to be here and happy to be showing at the Tanoto with everyone. So my name is Stephanie Comilang, and I live in Berlin. That's me up there in my studio with some embroideries on piña textile, actually. So this work called Piña, Why is the Sky Blue? I did in collaboration with my partner, who I work with sometimes. So I work alone as a filmmaker, as a video installation artist, as a textile artist, and I make sculpture as well. But this one I made in collaboration with my partner, Simon Speiser, who's a German Ecuadorian artist. And he's also my husband, so we traveled to our respective countries together, which are Ecuador and the Philippines. And in doing that, we quickly found that the connections there were really present, and of course, on one level, it's because of a colonial connection, Spanish colonial connection. But then we were trying to figure out what the sort of deeper connections were, and I really like using objects as a way to connect things. So we were thinking about the pineapple first. So the pineapple came from South America and traveled to the Philippines and was used as a kind of a form of currency. So it was a luxury item. And they say that the pineapple was passed from function to function, used as decoration and never really eaten because it was so valuable. And there's lots of folklore around the pineapple. There's lots of stories about the eyes of the pineapple, and there's songs about it. And you see it in the architecture in both the Philippines and Ecuador. So it's this interesting object that I like thinking through a colonial connection. But we were also looking at the connections between Ecuador and the Philippines through shamanism. And in the Philippines during pre-colonial times, the shaman was mostly female, and she was very central to society. So she would deal with agriculture, talking to the gods, marriage, everything, and we wanted to see if this also was true in Ecuador. So what we did is we basically drove around for a month in Ecuador, and we're talking to practicing shamans, contemporary shamans, or what we thought maybe a contemporary shaman could be. So here are a group called the Cyber Amazonas, and they're a pan-Amazonian group of women from Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia who communicate with radio programs and online journals. And they're amazing. We spent some time with them in Puyo, which is in the jungle, in the Amazon. And they have their own radio setup. there. So, and we were thinking about what a shaman means. And it's someone for us who is a collector of information, someone who stores information and is able to, I guess, give it out, send it out. And so for us, the Cyber Amazonas, who you see in the film, were one of these groups of people that we were thinking about. So there's an element of, so the original exhibition was a film, which you see here. And it also included VR, which is not in the exhibition. And then there's also the weavings that you see here. And so these, maybe I'll explain the weavings a little bit, but the weavings are made from piña fabric. So the leaves, the tops of the pineapples, which have been pounded and then hand woven. So it's this very delicate textile, again, that the Filipinos have sort of made their own, because this fiber, piña, doesn't really exist anywhere else in the world. It's something that, actually, when the Spanish came, the Filipinos made this textile, and then the Spanish made the Filipinos wear shirts made out of this textile. It's see-through, this textile. So in them wearing it, they couldn't conceal weapons, so it was a form of suppression. But now it's ubiquitous. Like, you see it in the Philippines everywhere. There are shirts made of barong Tagalogs, which are these beautiful shirts with embroidery. So it's a sort of fabric that Filipinos have made their own over time. And so it's piña fabric, but what we did is we used a 3D printer to create these designs. So these designs are traditional weaving patterns from both the Philippines and Ecuador. And we sort of like stretched them or altered them in some way to create these new designs. And so I think like technology for me in my work is really important. I think when I film, I really like thinking about the camera and like who the camera is. So I like using things like, right now I'm filming with meta glasses, so you get this super like, on this new project that I'm doing about the history of chocolate, you get this very like POV sense of the character, but also I filmed with a drone, and the drone has become a character. There's a bit of drone used in this film, but also I made a film called Come to Me Paradise, which is a science fiction documentary about Filipino domestic workers in Hong Kong, told from the perspective of a ghost played by a drone. So technology here was used as a way to create a character. The VR that is usually accompanying Piña Huayza Sky Blue creates this sense of intimacy. We shot with this camera that's normally used for VR porn. So you get this really like one-on-one, super intimate, facing the character situation that you can't really get with film. So like VR created this really super, it's sort of expanded cinema that you can't really get with something like regular like video, you know? So really thinking about like what the camera does and how that creates, I guess for me it is this sort of like real intimacy that I'm looking for in the work that I make, this connection. Like I think about why I'm using the type of camera, why I'm using this type of technology. And for me, that's super important. I'm not a tech person at all. Like I'm actually very bad with technology, but I like thinking about technology and how it can connect us. So the way that I usually also contact the people who are in my films is through like TikTok or Instagram. It's this way of like creating this sort of like very democratic way of speaking to each other right away. And it's the way that, you know, it's also a way that we all know how to communicate, you know? If we want to talk to someone we don't know, we can just message them on whatever, TikTok or Instagram, and then maybe they'll respond. but I like this way of like easy communication. I like using the internet as a way to cast, to talk to people, to connect.
Yeah, that's super interesting to see how technology for you is not this objectified external thing, but it's very embodied in your practice and thinking on a philosophical level almost, but also practical level. I think that's fascinating. Yeah, and I want to go back to Carolina. I think you approach technology in a different way. For me, my reading of your work is it's much more whimsical. It's much more sort of imaginative as what it could be in the past and what could it alternatively be in the present or in the future. And the piece that you're showing in the exhibition, which I'm gonna fast forward the slides.
So parenthesis, I want to thank Fumitake Tamura, who is downstairs, because he's a very part of the performance, and we've been working it's our first collaboration, but I forgot to mention him. Sorry.
And so this is the first time actually I saw your work, this beautiful exhibition as a site-specific installation, which also the display was really fantastical in the sense that it's juxtaposing with this pre-Columbian artifacts and all the sort of historical artifacts itself, and it really spoke to your work in a very uncanny way. I want to hear a little bit more about the process of this project. This is a different work, yeah? But the process of coming up with the series and how you really situated the work in this very historical, sometimes could be overwhelming, like context. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we are living in a time where technology is more and more abstract and invisible and intangible and very difficult to like grasp in a physical way. So I think my approach with working with material and specifically with painting is trying to sort of illustrate what's happening with this technology that it's around us. And in this series specifically working with like found packaging that were part of a previous technology device like speakers or computers or screens and giving it a second life. It was a little bit of the intention of not only like putting a body and a weight into like the invisibility of technology, but also like this sense of immortalize and like giving a different cycle or a new cycle. And I also work a lot with the ways, the accessibility of things in a domestic or like an everyday life, urban, specifically in urban context, where we can open the water and we have this water coming out in our apartment and we don't actually know the labyrinth of this crazy like underground systems that are part of our commodities, right? So a lot of my work tries to put up front those commodities in a way. So I was trying to work with the idea of like the fluctuation of liquid or air through these tubes that were all around the installation, and how maybe the painting is part of also this fluctuation, not only of water or gas or AC or internet, but also the fluctuation of like a spiritual sense of the space. In this case, well, Diego Rivera, who created this museum, had the intention not only to store his Pre-Hispanic collection, but also be buried inside the museum when he died. And there was some intent of that happening, but then there was some bureaucracy happening. It didn't happen. But he actually thought this place as a mausoleum. And in the process of making these works, my father passed away in a very uncertain way. So a lot of the works are like kind of a deep reflection of mortality, but immortality, and like what other stages in the spiritual world can exist. And technology is a big part of it, because I was also, I don't know, like when someone passes away or when someone is far away, you have all these devices, accessibilities of, and I was hearing his voice through audios, right, or the images that were from the past. So in a sense, technology is also a way of reviving or like immortalizing certain aspects of the like our ephemeral humanity. And what else? And then the sounds is a very important part, because we did record inside the museum trying to capture invisible frequencies in the space. And we had very spooky situations that I'm not gonna, anecdotes that I'm not gonna tell, but the place is basically very charged, and there's a lot of entities, and we, like through sound, we really capture something else. And those sounds are the ones that you can hear in the rooms through the speakers. And there's also like this playful aspect of like putting the tubes in the middle of such these sculptures that are so untouchable, and there's so much respect, especially in the Mexican culture, that are you know, this museum is like a UNESCO protected place. So it was also like a, I don't know, like a comment or interaction of bringing those sculptures alive, and hearing the voices of them.
Yeah, that's great. I was just thinking maybe you want to say a few more words about the museum itself, because I suppose people here are not really familiar about the museum, but itself is a very fascinating place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long story, but basically Diego Rivera was, during his whole life, he collected a lot of pre-Hispanic pieces in a very cheap way. Like he was buying things in Yucatan and places where nobody was buying at that time in the 50s. And he gained a big collection. And the architecture of this place was like a little bit in collaboration with the Juan O'Gorman, that it's another architect. Well, he designed the ceilings, but he died and the place was never made. But his daughter, who's an architect, ended up doing the project with all the plans that he initially had. And this room right here has a very important mural called, I forgot the name. It's not there.
It's not there.
The Man in the Universe, I think, but it's a mural that was supposed to be done in the Rockefeller Center in the US, but it was censored because Stalin and Lenin were represented in the mural. And this piece I did, it's called the Biocosmic Garden, and it's found plants of the museum, of the garden of the museum, because the show happened during the fall, and the garden had all these dry, dead plants. So again, it was like this intention of technology reviving the dead plants through these circuits. It was a choreography, like a ballet mechanic or something like that. And I worked together with a programmer, and we did some sort of choreographical 20-minute piece. And I have to mention also that I had a strong influence of Russian cosmism, that it's this beginning of the 20th century crazy moment in Russia where there's all these theories of reviving the dead. and a lot of people writing about how technology can help reviving that. Of course, that took a different journey in our contemporary world, but initially it was part of a very esoteric and mystical project that also it was like the foundation of the space program in Russia, that it's also very weird to think that a space program came initially from an esoteric and mystical approach. And the mural has a lot of connection with the Russian cosmos, of course, because the Soviets and the Mexicans, in the revolution, there was a strong bridge. And I think that Diego read these manifestos, but it's a speculation. We don't know. Nobody knows. But it was a little bit of a comment about this connection.
Yeah, it's certainly a very fascinating place itself. I think there are many layers of different histories and mythologies and ideologies kind of really condensed in one place. If you ever have the opportunity to visit Mexico City, you should definitely go and see the museum. And I'm going to go back to Stephanie. I actually wanted to also ask you to talk about another work of yours, which I also really loved and was able to see it in New York, but I know it's also exhibited as part of the Sharjah Biennial very recently. I think it's very interesting for me to actually look at your work, because there is always an object or kind of a commodity, what we think is in Pinar is the pineapple, and here is the pearl. Like, in a way, you use them as a metaphor or like a starting point to make visible also a system, that a global system oftentimes that are invisible to people who are consuming these things. So I think it's a very interesting approach to the material as well, and I want to hear a little bit more of you talking about it in this particular case also.
So what you're looking at is an exhibition that I did in September in Frankfurt at the Schöne Kunsthalle, and the exhibition, one of the pieces in the exhibition was a work that is called Search for Life 2. And it's part of a diptych. First part, chapter 1, was shown at the TBA 21 space in Madrid. And then part 2 was shown at the Sharjah Biennial in Sharjah in 2025. The work deals a lot with the exchange between places. And this is something that I kind of keep coming back to, because I like seeing how one place relates to another place. I think that's the thing that I keep coming back to. So, and maybe I'll take a thing, because I think you can take anything in the world and then draw a map outwards to many different places, many different histories, many different times, many different people, and see the connection there. And for me, that's super interesting. So, Search for Life 1, I was looking at how Acapulco, the shipping routes between Acapulco and Manila for 300 years, so during the Galeon trade routes, things that were traded between the two places. I was also looking at the migratory routes of the monarch butterfly, which goes from Canada to Mexico to Michoacan. Every year they travel 5,000 kilometers, I think, and they're the longest traveling animals in the world. And they go through like 5 generations, and one of the generations becomes a super butterfly. So I was kind of obsessed with like the butterfly, but then also I was looking at Filipino seafarers who make up 25% of the laborers in shipping. Specifically looking at these 2 seafarers who aren't seafarers anymore. One became a painter and one became a florist, so it talks about their stories. It's just this whole thing about the connection between places and labor and the monarch butterfly. So that's part 1. Part 2, I took the pearl because I was showing this initially in Sharjah, where before any sort of development, it was a fishing town, and also they were pearl divers in the UAE. So I wanted to look at something that was local to Sharjah. So I made a massive pearl curtain and then projected onto it. So it was a film initially. So I projected the film onto the pearls, and it created this like very pixelated way, again looking at technology, but in a different way. In Sharjah, I had a pearl curtain that was 5 meters high and 7 meters across, so really, really big. And then I also had, I built kind of like a pier, like a wooden pier that you would find, near the water. And so you could climb up on top of it or go below. There was also an LED screen, so the two screens were sort of facing each other. There was an LED screen, of course it's pixelated, so they sort of mirrored each other. And so the film took the pearl as sort of a way of talking about currency and value, but then also, of course, if we're talking about the UAE, we can't talk about the UAE without talking about migrant laborers in the UAE. So I was talking to, initially I actually wanted to make this work and look at like Filipino laborers, because a lot of them become entertainers because we're such good singers. And so they get into the entertainment industry as like performers. But then as I was researching on Instagram and TikTok, trying to find these people, I came across this woman who's in this K-pop cover dance group called the Pixies. There they are there. And she struck me because she's half Emirati, half Filipina. And that's really rare, I think, in the UAE. So this mixture of cultures is something that really interested me. So I ended up meeting her. She told me about her story, which was really difficult, her growing up in the UAE. She wasn't considered Emirati enough, so she was pushed to the side. Yeah, it was hard for her. So she joined this group, which was called the Pixies, and they're this sort of like mixture of like what the Emirates is. So there's like Filipino, there was a Lebanese, there was like all of these different types of people who are in this K-pop cover dance group dancing K-pop. So I found that really interesting because of course K-pop isn't from there. So I filmed them as she was like one of the main characters. And then I also filmed this indigenous family from the indigenous group, the Sama Bajau, who are close to Malaysia, actually, an island very close to Malaysia, but it's in the Philippines. And so they have a family tradition of pearl diving. And they talked about how, his grandfather could hold his breath underwater for 10 minutes and like, because that was their livelihood. They live on water, and they live on this sort of stilt architecture, and they're stateless as well. So, yeah, I think this sort of like looking at how the connections are there through the lens of an object is something that I'm super interested in doing. And I now, I was talking about thinking of the camera as a character. Now I'm looking at the screen and what the screen can do. That's really interesting for me, and how, sometimes you can walk behind the screen. Because in this was in Frankfurt, I put the screen kind of in the middle of the room so you could go behind the screen and watch it from behind, because it made this, you could like see the projection on the ground but also see it from behind too. I didn't realize that these pearls were translucent. So it made this like really uncanny way of watching the film. And there's beaded curtains in the back there that are basically like stills from the film, but we hand beaded the stills. So it's this really laborious way of like creating images. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think the work also has had the multiple lives because it's always shown in different kind of formation and composition, which I think speaks really well about how you consider these apparatus of filming and showing all as part of the work and the characters. Maybe, Carolina, I want you to speak another work, perhaps, so people have a little bit more context of your practice, which led us to this piece. I didn't see it, I didn't know about it, so it would be great you can tell us a little bit more, and seem to have like a relationship with water and also the underwater world.
Yes, so this is called Isla Eléctrica, and it's a piece that I live in a town I'm Argentinian, but I live in Mexico for 10 years now. And I live in a town where clay is a really strong material, and there's different clays all over. So I was starting to explore with that material, and I was fascinated by the sound of clay dissolving in the water, heard through a hydrophone, that are microphones you can put in the water. So this whole research that became something else, and something that I later discovered. I think one of the fascinating things of doing projects like that it's starting with a micro thing like a sound, and then that will eventually like build up a whole project that it's unexpected. So I was exploring with the sound, and I was like trying to find histories around the dissolving cities or underground cities. And my neighbor, who's a very known anthropologist, told me about an area in the border between Veracruz and Oaxaca that has a sunken city, a city that was underwater, out of very heavy displacement in the 50s with the construction of a dam, a water dam, that will bring electricity all over that area. So a lot of my work, it's also about the project of modernism. I say like I'm the granddaughter of modernism and the daughter of neoliberalism, because later I also have work about financial crisis in Argentina. But I was starting to explore these ideas of invading a landscape through such invasive materials like concrete and metal and electricity, and what happens with those landscapes and the people living and the nature and the animals. So I went in an excursion to what it's left. It's an old island, and it was a fascinating trip that I did, with the idea of like maybe bringing something back, some stories and anecdotes. But what I was mostly inspired with that trip was the amount of mythologies and beliefs around the beginning of electricity. And like when electricity arrives in these towns, the way people adjust to it is by creating all these stories and mythologies about these chaneques, that are these little people that capture the kids, and gigantic bones, and I don't know, all sorts of crazy stories that I brought back home, and very inspired by this. And this place is called Mil Islas today because all the mountains, you see like all these beautiful islands surrounded by water, but actually they're the top of the mountains that are underwater. So it's quite a stunning and beautiful landscape, but it's also terrible because it's part of this huge, how do you say, ecocidio? I don't know the word. ecocide. It was a huge ecocide and a huge displacement. So I wanted to bring a little bit of those worlds into this space that it's a gallery space that I work with in Mexico. And the idea is like fragmentations of the story of this island, but through, I always work with science fiction in a way of bringing fiction narratives around socio-political events that actually happen. But I feel like fiction opens up, and for me it's a way of feeling more free when I'm doing work. So the fish tanks have this clay, there's a city made out of clay, inspired by a post-war Japanese architecture movement. It's the metabolist architecture. And the idea is that all these buildings are submerging in the water, and you can actually hear the sound of this moment of the submersion. And it was also like there was activation through the weeks where we were submerging the pieces and hear them live. And then there's a video about how, there's two videos. One is the Metabolist City as a manifesto of the actual inhabitants of this underwater city. And they are manifesting there's opposition of basically they're against stability and all sense of stability. And this is a bit a statement about the modern project, especially in Latin America, how the modern project arrives with all these ideological heavy ideas of stability and progress and technological progress, and how the reactions of that and the actual effects of that. So also there's a video of birds in cables. I was making videos of all these birds that are sitting on the cables, and I wrote a fiction about how they invented a code to communicate between each other. So the video tells the story that they tell each other, and yeah, that's. Sorry for the extension.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, and I also see you both have a very unique way of telling the stories that matters to you, to the work, and connect it back to the bigger socio-political reality. I just have one last question. It's for both of you. In thinking about the connection, bring it back to our exhibition, this, bigger research on materiality. I think the connection is very evident in the ways of how your work really think through these different aspects, and also expand the understanding of materiality from something that is just very tangible and concrete to things that might be invisible and immaterial in a sense, sort of play with the positive and negative shape around these concepts. So maybe I just want to know a little bit more about each of your understanding in terms of these ideas being played out in relationship with your own work, and also how do you feel that is a relevant and important sort of discourse today?
I'm actually pretty new to working with material. And because I started out as a filmmaker, and I think the first time that I started using material was for an installation with Come to Me Paradise, the science fiction documentary that I made. The picture isn't here, but I was asked to do a video installation for Ghost, which is a video triennial in Bangkok that was first initiated by Korakrit. He's also a video artist, and like his gallery. And he asked me to do like a video installation, an expanded version of this. And so I started thinking about how I could do that in the space. And I was thinking of working with cardboard, which is something that, discarded material, which is something that you use. And the reason why is because if you've ever been to Hong Kong and you've seen how, so the women by law, the domestic laborers in Hong Kong, the Filipino and Indonesian domestic workers in Hong Kong, by law have to live with their employers because there's no space in Hong Kong. So that creates this, this conundrum, this really awful conundrum for the women there, because on their day off, they have one day off, which is Sunday usually, they don't want to live with it. They don't want to be in their employer's house. So where do they go? They basically empty out onto the streets, creating this thing that looks like, I've heard both. People have said it's a festival, or it looks like there's homeless people, because they create these temporary spaces out of cardboard boxes, they're sort of trying to create their private spaces, so they create these rooms with string and cardboard boxes. So they line the streets of central Hong Kong, which is normally used for finance during the day. So you normally see bankers and finance people walking along the walkways of Hong Kong, but now they're transformed into these spaces that the women have created, domestic spaces almost. They basically set up these spaces and use them for being on their phones or doing manicures and pedicures with each other, hanging out basically. Things that you would do at home that they can't do at home, that they do in these temporary spaces. So cardboard boxes. So the installation that I made was, it was a 3-channel video installation using cardboard boxes and sort of recreating, lining the floor and the walls, different walls with this cardboard. And so you, as a viewer, would sit in the cardboard watching the film that I would make. So that was the first time that I thought about material outside of filmmaking. And I still think about material in a way that the audience can inhabit the space more. And now that I'm making sort of more expanded, bigger installations, I'm working with an exhibition architect, and she's really great. She actually has worked with Lawrence Leck on the exhibition at the Art and Science Museum. But she is great because she's helping me think about how the audience experiences the work. So that's something, I guess, with material I'm thinking about, other than the pearl curtain and the beads and the piña work and all of that stuff.
I think for me, lately I think a lot about opacity and how dominant structures, or the structures that kind of dominate our everyday life, expand in kind of a silent and invisible way. And I think that's why my work usually it's seen as retrofuturistic, because I think for the idea of illustrating some sort of technological sense of futurism is from the past, and I think we don't have that anymore. I mean, I think we're going more and more into this, as I said before, this intangible and abstract sense of the technological world. So I think my work is constantly kind of insisting in bringing back a body and an image and some sense of weight to a notion of future that we don't know, but at least there's an intention of illustrating it. And I think as a form of resistance, even trying to articulate things that are that we can't articulate, like the idea of finance, or the idea of a sense of future, or a technological way of relating with this this era that we're trying to grasp. Yeah, I think my work, I like to think that that is a form of resistance towards the opacity of forms of opacity of control that we are unaware more and more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really great. That's also a key thought, I think, in this exhibition, to really think about how our tactile sensation and touch and the bodily experience is a form of resistance, whether you're, explicitly aware of it or just kind of longing for it. I think there's always this desire as things becomes more and more digitized. People do have this longing to touch things and really to be connected. So with that note, we'll wrap up the conversation. But if any of you have a question or two, we're also happy to take. I'm just going to see if anyone has a question for the artist. Okay.
Don't be shy.
It's okay. I think if anyone wants to talk to the artist and approach them later, please do feel free. And as I mentioned earlier, the exhibition will be turned back on, so you will have a more opportunity to now see the work again. If you have already seen it, perhaps you will have some new ideas and understanding of the work after you listen to the talk. So thank you so much for coming, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.